South African gun laws are back in the spotlight following the recent shootings in different parts of the country. There has been a series of shootings, with the latest one taking place on Saturday in Lenasia, where 3 people were shot dead and 2 wounded. In Soweto, 16 people were killed at a tavern over a week ago. Joining me now to talk about the psychology of mass shootings in South Africa is forensic psychologist Dr. Gérard Labuschagne. Dr. Labuschagne, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. It all seems rather bizarre, and it seems to be moving across the provinces, moving across different areas where these shootings are taking place. People are not being robbed for their items, they're just being shot. What on earth could be going on?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately in South Africa, we haven't really had a history of mass shootings. We had Tempe military base, I think it was in the late 1990s, where a disgruntled employee took a SANDF firearm and shot a bunch of people. We had a shooting in Rosebank police station by a member of the police that had been dismissed and went and took a police firearm and committed a shooting. So we haven't really had these, surprisingly, because we do have a high rate of gun ownership and, of course, illegal firearms. But one also has to look at not all mass shootings are the same and motivated by the same reasons. So you get, for example, the American type ones, which is typically a person who has some issue, disgruntled about something, and targets a specific place to, sort of vent their anger and revenge. And then, of course, you get shootings like we had in Cape Town in the Sizzlers shooting in the early 2000s, which was a robbery gone wrong that ended up with the suspect shooting most of the people that were inside the massage parlor at the time. So it's difficult to say what these are. I mean, it is unusual we suddenly have so many in a short period of time throughout the country. I'm hesitant to say that there's a link between them, and the fact that there are multiple gunmen by the sounds of it, and using things like AK-47s, it's probably more likely crime-related in the sense of organized crime or something of that type of nature, as opposed to these American-style individual with a grievance who goes out to commit a mass shooting.
These mass shootings raise questions around the psychology of violence and the emotional aftermath.
Yeah, I mean, okay, obviously in terms of the offender, you have to have a certain state of mind to allow you to go and, potentially kill multiple people. And again, that would be depending on what their motive was, would have a different kind of psychology behind it. And of course, the impact upon the society, which is terror. Taverns are places where many people hang out, and especially on weekends, if not during the week. So it is very fear-provoking and a sort of absence of really any clear reason at this point why those specific taverns were targeted, which hopefully the police investigation will reveal. It's almost like having a serial murderer running around in your community. You don't know when they're going to strike, who they're going to strike, etc. And of course that creates a lot of fear. But you also have to look at it, people tend to commit crimes if they think they're going to get away with it. So in a way, it is also perhaps a commentary on our policing that if you don't fear walking into a crowded place and shooting a bunch of people and leaving, that you're not going to get caught, then of course it doesn't really have much of a deterrence for other people.
And it all, because of the repetition and the time factor, it's all happening within very close proximity in terms of time, then it would raise psychological terms like the copycat crime syndrome, so to speak. I mean, what is that about?
Yeah, so we do see, for example, in these sort of American-style ones where it's an individual with a grievance towards that particular target. It's a very personal grievance that's developed over a period of time to the point where they plan the attack. And we do see in the United States, then, when you have one of those types of U.S. mass shootings, very soon, in a week or two thereafter, there's another one or two. They do tend to piggyback upon each other. Again, these ones are probably going to be more general crime-related, organized crime-related, like the old taxi wars where we used to have shootings kind of a similar nature in different circumstances. So I don't think these are probably psychological copycats necessarily. It's more likely, as I said, linked to almost like turf wars, gang wars that are taking place. But of course, a police investigation will have to just clarify that. On the sort of extreme side of the spectrum, could this be terrorist-related? People who view taverns as evil places and decide to go and exercise their violence towards those individuals. But again, we're going to have to wait for the police investigation. Hopefully the police will be successful in solving a few of these so we can get an idea of, again, the general motive for these and any remote possibility that they could, of course, be linked.
Where does this now leave South Africans? I mean, they already are still trying to recover from the effects of COVID-19, the economy, and of course their emotional well-being. As we listen to Sadek speak to some of the elements that define how South Africans are feeling, we know that stress, anxiety and depression have come to the forefront at this time.
I think South Africans, because of our general high crime rate, I think it's more than 22,000 murders a year, which is phenomenal, let alone all the other types of crimes. I think we get crime fatigue. So, we have a bit of an outrage, but then within a few days, unless something else happens, like we've been having with these multiple incidents, we kind of move on. So we have this temporary outrage that we're not really able to sustain because there's just so much of this type of violence going on. So I think, will this lead to any changes? I don't know. And again, we'll have to determine the motive to see where we need to make changes in certain aspects. But, we tend to move on. We get outraged by a woman raped and murdered for a week, and then we move on. That's unfortunately the South African way because we have so much trauma that we're dealing with in general that I think we're just generally burnt out and don't have the energy to sustain long outrage at horrible incidents.
What about coping mechanisms? Yes, we do tend to move on, but the communities that have been affected live in fear.
Yeah, and I think that's when you start to see the community having these service protest delivery protests. You have them sort of going on vigilante episodes, venting their anger. You have them attacking police stations because that becomes the place where they do vent their anger because this is the people who are supposed to be dealing with this for us and making us safe. So I think that's always one of the concerns. And of course, we're sitting in a year after the powder keg for what could trigger something to happen that can spin off and become something bigger. And I think, hopefully law enforcement is closely watching these types of scenarios to see what could one event end up triggering another kind of larger event.
And how do people cope in the meantime? What advice would you have in terms of coping mechanisms and perhaps not feeling so anxious and paranoid that as you walk into the street, someone could just shoot you?
Yeah, look, I think for people who are closer to these incidents, who lived in those areas, who are nearby those areas when they took place or were present in some degree, of course, seek professional help if you're struggling, if you're having nightmares, if you're having anxiety attacks, flashbacks about these types of events, seek professional help, whether it be from a local clinic or if you have access to sort of private health care. For the communities at large, I think it's the general type of stuff that we should be doing on an everyday basis, looking after yourself physically, exercising, eating right as far as you can within your budget. And just remember that, this is a small group of people that are terrorizing the wider population of South Africa. And I think most South Africans are good, decent people. And that's who we really are. We're not sort of defined by these horrible lone incidences that happen.
Thank you very much. Let's leave it there for now. Some inspiring words there. South Africa forensic psychologist, Dr. Gérard Labuschagne, speaking to some pointers there around the psychology of these recent shootings. Now,